across a diverse set of industries such as food science, agriculture, e-commerce, social media, blockchain, healthcare, medical, anything you can think about. He has helped a lot of people understand business immigration and help them navigate their own immigration journeys by providing the excellence that he has achieved through his knowledge and experience in this industry. So from now on, I think our flow is around now. As I've given him an introduction, now Brian is gonna just like take the floor, and Brian, now it's your time.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna jump into it because I know people probably have a lot of questions, and I want to leave as much time as we can at the end for people to ask their questions live. I think there's a lot of value in just getting raw, real answers, and I think that's really important. So I want to just dive right in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm glad that everyone is able to meet today for this session, and I appreciate Dr. Paul arranging this and putting it together. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about the EB1. And primarily we're going to focus on EB1A. So if anyone has other questions about EB1B and other things like that, we'll take those questions as well. But do know that this presentation is going to be primarily all about that EB1A category. And just to start out, just so everyone knows, this is the hardest way, without a doubt, to get a green card in the United States. It is, when you're making an EB1 argument, you're arguing that you have risen to the very top of your field. Thus, you're trying to argue to USCIS, you're the best of the best, and there's no one else like you. And I just want everyone to know that's true. You're very unique. Every profile is very unique. And so just a couple of things about how immigration lawyers evaluate profiles. It's kind of a little bit of a guessing game, right? And I think for those of you who have worked with an attorney or met with somebody already, or even got feedback on your profile from a number of different people, you might hear different things from different attorneys because we all have different experiences. And the EB1 is a little bit of a moving target. So every couple of months, I feel like we get different feedback from USCIS or from the Administrative Appeals Office telling us that certain things are happening in the way they're evaluating cases. We'll get different kinds of RFEs, different types of denials, and that goes to inform our process and how we think about things. And so everyone has a little bit different information. So I think that's helpful in a lot of ways because it means it's a subjective review. It also can be very frustrating because you're trying to build a profile and hit all these criteria, and sometimes how USCIS is evaluating those criteria changes. So let's talk about the bullets. So I built this presentation to talk about each of the 10 bullets to start out with, and then we'll compare a couple of profiles. First of all, I wanted to talk about two of the most difficult bullets. So this is my opinion. Evidence of receipt of lesser nationally or internationally recognized prizes or awards for excellence, and evidence of your membership in associations in the field which demand outstanding achievement of their members are very difficult bullets to hit. It's just hard to have a prize or an award that really meets that criteria. A lot of people will try school awards, grants, prizes, best poster awards, things like that. And it's just really hard. Those arguments usually fall flat at USCIS. So when I usually build EB1 applications for candidates, I'm using that evidence more in the original contributions criteria. So just know those are difficult. And then evidence of memberships and associations in the field, those are also difficult. I think a lot of people recently have seen the AAO guidance that the senior level membership for IEEE, for example, has received a lot of scrutiny from USCIS. It's really hard to meet that argument. And senior membership at IEEE means that you're in the top 10% of members at IEEE. And so you're already showing that you're in the 90th percentile for something, and USCIS is pushing back on that. So just, I think that's evidence enough that that's a really difficult category, a really difficult criteria right now at USCIS. And we'll talk more about some questions with those later, but difficult bullets. You can meet them. I'm not saying you can't, but it's difficult. Things you're usually going to be making an argument on almost every EB1 I file has an argument that the person meets these two bullets. Every EB1 I file has an argument that you have some type of evidence of an original contribution of major significance to your field. If you didn't have that argument in your petition, then USCIS will almost certainly deny it. So you're definitely going to be making an argument that you've contributed something to your field. And then most people will be arguing they've filled a leading or a critical role in a distinguished organization. Now, the question I get a lot with this one is, what is a distinguished organization? And to be honest, I think almost all organizations are going to meet the level of scrutiny USCIS gives when they're evaluating a distinguished organization, but you do need to provide evidence that your organization you participate in has received funding or done something amazing or contributed somehow in your field. And then as long as you've been in a leading role, meaning you've led a team or had subordinates, or you've worked on critical projects, then you're gonna make an argument. And that's a really good thing for you, because you can really get good letters of recommendation to meet that criteria. So most people are gonna meet those two. Quick note on those before I move to the next slide. If you don't meet one of those criteria, that might be okay. I have seen successful EB1 applications, for example, for people in a PhD program who haven't met the leading or critical role criteria, and they've still successfully put together a good EB1 application. So do know it's not necessarily necessary. It's just usually you're going to be making that argument, because most EB1 applicants are going to be have had some kind of amazing role at some type of organization. All right, these are the 3 bullets that people work on to improve the most. And I think the hot topic bullet right now in EB1 is a lot of people really work on that second bullet I have listed on this slide, that evidence that you have been asked to judge the work of others, either individually or on a panel. Tons of people are really working on that one. And what I mean is, peer review is kind of a low-hanging fruit for a lot of people, and that's the case for people that have got a PhD, or they just have a master's degree, or even people with a bachelor's degree. Those opportunities can be available because a lot of journals are really looking for people to do that. I will say peer review isn't as good of evidence as if you're asked to judge a high-profile competition that gives an award in your area of specialty. So a lot of people will ask me questions like, well, how many peer review do I need? And the honest answer is, I have no idea. And the reality is, it depends on what journals you're peer reviewing for. It depends on their impact factor. And it depends on what field you're in. Some fields, peer review is more readily available than others. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. But those competitions can be better. And I'm talking about things like hackathons, or I just recently did an evaluation of a guy that had Stevie Awards and Globee Awards. Those things can be helpful for an EB1 petition. And part of it's about how you present that information, but that can be a good opportunity. I think there's a lot of opportunities to judge the work of others in your field. Another thing to know, usually work judging students isn't as helpful. And what I mean by students is I'm referring to people that aren't professionals. So like bachelor students or high school students, those things aren't going to work as well. Now, like if you're reviewing the work of fellow PhDs, that's a different story, or even master's degree professionals, or just professionals who have accomplished something in their field, that's a different story. But do know that sometimes there's higher scrutiny for student judging. The other 2 categories here are evidence of authorship and evidence of material published about you. I think there's a ton of opportunity there. And I've seen some really creative EB1 applications. For example, I had a guy I worked with who started a podcast to build his EB1 profile, which a lot of you are thinking like anyone can start a podcast. And yeah, that's true. Anyone can start a podcast. But the amazing thing for him was he started his podcast and it quickly became the number 2 or 3 ranked podcast for software engineers. And there was clear evidence that other people in his field, other extraordinary individuals, were tuning in on a weekly basis, and he could provide that evidence, and even was able to get letters from people stating that they had used things that he had talked about on his podcast to further their work and further their field. And I really think that was the thing that got him his EB1 approved. So there's a lot of opportunity in these two areas. Things I've had other people do is I've had qualified candidates reach out to newspaper outlets or trade publications, and they've said things like, hey, I'll write a column in your newspaper for free for six columns for 6 months or 6 weeks. And could you write a column about me and my work in exchange for that? And that's worked. There's opportunities all over the world for that. And do know your published material doesn't have to be in the United States. Your published material can be in India, it can be in Brazil, it can be in Africa. There just needs to be evidence that there's high readership and that other people in your field are reading it if it's not a newspaper or news source that's high readership. So good opportunities there. Other things people have done is I've had a lot of people publish books. Just a word of caution, USCIS has become aware that a lot of people are self-publishing. And if you're self-publishing and you can't show that the book is read by a lot of people, the only evidence you have is that you wrote a book, but there's no evidence it's being used, no evidence it's being purchased, no evidence it's being read. That's receiving a lot of scrutiny because it's just not as good of evidence. So if you are publishing a book, you need to be building evidence that it's being purchased, it's being read, it's being used. And I'm talking about, you can even get an email from like Amazon about purchase statistics, or you can get a course list from a university that's using your book. And even if it's a chapter in a book, if there's like a course list that requires the book that you've written in as required reading for students, that's good evidence, things like that. So a lot of opportunity with these 3 bullets. Salary and other remuneration. So I just gave this its own slide because I get so many questions about salary lately. And I just want to say salary is a tough bullet. And I almost put it on that difficult bullet slide. But salary is just a tough bullet in general right now because anyone can be paid a lot. So there's a lot of examples of people in your various industries where someone will be paid a lot and they really haven't accomplished a lot, or they're even given a title and they haven't accomplished a lot. Now, obviously, if someone's making $300,000, that's going to be good evidence. USCIS isn't going to bat an eye at that. They're going to realize that only the top of the top in any field is going to be making that much. But they are pushing back on high salary. So the advice I've been giving people for high salary is you should look to see if your salary is in the 90th percentile of other individuals in your field in your geographic area. So, for example, I'm located in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I would compare my salary, my attorney salary, to other attorneys in the Lincoln, Nebraska area. So I'd be even maybe comparing my salary to people in Omaha, Nebraska. If you're in California, you're going to be comparing your salary to people in California. Now, you also can make a comparison of your salary compared to other professionals across the U.S., but do note that USCIS realizes and recognizes that people are paid differently in different geographic areas. So if you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, you're probably not going to be compared to people in California, which is a huge blessing because attorneys in California make a lot more. I think the average starting salary for an attorney in Lincoln, Nebraska is somewhere around $60,000. And in the Bay Area, it's more like $120,000. So big differences. And USCIS recognizes that. Another thing to note is salary really depends on your field. There is no doubt that software engineers and people in the tech industry are going to be making a lot more money right now than people in sciences. And that's just a reality. And do know that that matters. Your field matters, where you're located matters. And if you hit that 90th percentile, then you probably have a good argument. Do note, even if you're hitting that 90th percentile, it's still a hard category. You still might receive pushback. There's no guarantees with it, because your salary should really teach a story, right? It should say something about you. You should be paid what you're paid because of your accomplishments. Good story about that. Recently, I worked with an amazing EB1 candidate, and he received a huge stock at his company because of his success on a project. And that was really great evidence, because not only were we showing, hey, he has a big salary, but we also were able to show he's been recognized for his achievements in his field, the things that he's accomplished, and his company has recognized that. And he has a letter from the CEO saying, we are giving you $100,000 worth of stock at our company because you have changed the industry and you've accomplished this amazing thing. So that's even stronger evidence than just your base salary. And also know, it's for salary and other remuneration, that can include bonuses, that can include stock options, that can include other things. It's just really helpful to show it's related to your work. All right, I'm gonna go to the next slide. And then these two bullets probably don't apply to people on this webinar. Evidence of commercial success in the performing arts, evidence that your work has been displayed at artistic exhibitions or showcases. That's probably not you. You can make a comparison. So I have heard of other practitioners in the industry arguing that, like, showcases for scientific accomplishments or posters and things, they've tried to argue that that's comparable evidence. I typically don't even make that argument in the petitions I file. And the reason is I usually use that as original contributions evidence instead. So probably not you. I just include the criteria for an outstanding professor or researcher here. The difference between EB1A and EB1B is you need to hit 2 of these 6 criteria instead of 3 of those other 10 criteria. Sometimes this is a lower standard, so the EB1A and the EB1B are adjudicated differently. EB1A is actually harder to get. EB1B is a lower standard because it's extraordinary person of extraordinary ability versus outstanding professor or researcher. So if you are an outstanding professor or researcher, this might be a lower hanging fruit. And I usually tell people, like, if your company is willing to sponsor an EB1B, then you should take that route. Like, that's a really great option. Now, the reason why some people won't is the EB1A as a self-sponsored visa option allows you to change companies without losing your opportunity to get a green card later on. So even some outstanding professors or researchers are going to be filing in that EB1A category instead of EB1B. But if you don't have plans on moving companies, that EB1B is probably a better option for you. If you meet the criteria and if your company hires professors and researchers. All right, here's just a few questions I wanted to address that were put forth prior to the webinar. So these are some of the questions that some of the participants here today had. I'm going to go through them kind of fast, and apologies that I am talking so quickly. I just want to make sure we get through as many as we can. I've got 2 pages of these. So first question, can I apply without publications? Yes, absolutely. I'm actually kind of surprised by this question, and a lot of people have it. A ton of people have it. And I think it comes from, there's a lot of commentary about EB1 on the internet and in chat forums about the need for citations. And the reality is you don't have to have publications to get EB1. There's other ways to get it. You just have to hit 3 of the 10 criteria. So as long as those other criteria are strong, and what I mean by strong is you've risen to the very top of your field in those other criteria, and your field doesn't require publications, then you're good. Now, traditionally, scientific and medical categories are more likely to require publications. I think there's some exceptions there in medicine, especially in public health and things. There will be people that don't publish as much and are still extraordinary. So it's good for you to get an evaluation of your profile in that case, but you don't need publications to get an EB1. Do I need a PhD for EB1? No, you actually don't need a degree at all to get an EB1. That is not a requirement. A lot of EB1 candidates do have a PhD. That's very common for people to have achieved that level of recognition, especially in the sciences or medicine and things like that, but not a requirement. And a lot of tech folks aren't going to have a PhD. That's just the reality. USCIS is aware of that. So not a requirement. How many criteria do I need to meet for EB1A? 3. And that just comes straight from USCIS. You have to meet at least 3. Now, obviously, if you meet 6, that's probably going to be a stronger profile. But I've definitely reviewed people that meet 6 of the bullets, in my opinion. And I've reviewed people that have 3 bullets, and the person with 3 bullets is stronger. It's not only how many bullets or criteria do you meet, it's have you risen to the top of your field, and is there evidence of that? And that means how strongly you meet those bullets. So a good example could be there might be 2 people. One person's published 20 plus articles. The other person's only published 1 or 2 articles. The person that published 20 plus articles has 150 citations. The person who's published 2 articles has 500 citations. And the person who published only 2 articles was published in Nature or Science or another really high impact journal, and the other person wasn't. The person with only the 2 articles published has probably a stronger profile, just because more people are using their research, and it's higher impact. More people are using it. It's more prestigious. So it's not only how many criteria do you meet, it's how well do you meet the criteria? And I think that's the better question to be thinking about as you approach your EB1. How well do I meet these criteria? Have I actually risen to the top of my field? What memberships count, and do I need to be invited? Memberships, again, this is that hard to meet bullet. Maybe I'll take the do I need to be invited question first. The answer is no. You can invite yourself. You can apply to a membership, and it can still be prestigious and meet the burden for that criteria. The important thing, and this is answering the question, what memberships count, is it exclusive? Is it prestigious? What are the criteria for joining that organization or that association, that guild? So, for example, are there requirements that you've achieved a certain level of financial contribution for your company? Is there requirements for a number of articles cited to? Is there requirements for a number of patents? Things like that. What are their criteria? Who's judging the criteria? Who are the panel of experts judging the criteria? Who else is a member of the association? If you're a member of an association and you're sitting across the table from Elon Musk, you're probably in good company. So it's more about the prestige of the membership. And again, back to that IEEE example, a fellow in IEEE definitely is going to probably count, whereas they've really pushed back on that senior level membership. And that's just probably because it's not exclusive enough. When I look at it, the criteria don't weed out as many people as USCIS probably would like. Just a side note, I still use the IEEE membership in applications I file, as long as the person has other memberships. I probably am not going to include it if it's the only thing they're relying on. Can I get an EB1A if I'm a software engineer? Yes, absolutely. EB1A isn't just for one type of field. It's for any field, business, science, all the above. You just have to be able to show you've risen to the very top of your field and making significant contributions in your field. How do I make a case with low citations? Again, I think it matters. It's less about the number of citations and more about the impact on your field. And it depends on your field. So some fields, people aren't going to have as many citations. And a good way to show that is on your Google Scholar profile. There, if you click on what area of research you're doing, it's going to compare you to other professionals in your field. And I did that. I reviewed someone just the other day who only had like 50 citations. I was like, oh, that's pretty low. I clicked on their area of expertise, and the top professional in their field only had like 97 citations. They were listed in the top 10 in their field. And so even though they had 50 citations, they had a really good EB1 profile because there's not a lot of people doing research in that area. It's rare for those people to get citations, and they could clearly show they are one of the leading experts in what they were doing. They had high impact journals. They were cited in high impact journals, and they had other criteria satisfied that made them a strong candidate. So citations has to do with that authorship bullet. So as long as you can make a good argument there, you're probably in good shape. Do I need to get O1 before EB1? No. And I think the strategy there is like, you've shown that you're already qualified for an O1. I get this question a lot as well. And the reality is you don't have to. You can apply for an EB1 off of F1 status. You can apply for an EB1 off of H1B status, L1 status. You can apply off of H4 status, F2 dependent status. Your current non-immigrant status isn't going to impact your EB1 filing. Now, the one reason why an O1 might be helpful is then you can show, like, I've already met these standards, but you don't have to. It's not a requirement. And in a lot of ways, I like when candidates are an H1B when they're pursuing a green card if they can. So I'd obviously get advice from your attorney before deciding to switch your non-immigrant status to pursue a green card. But do know that you don't have to be an O1. My work was written about in high traffic websites. I wasn't mentioned. Can I use this as evidence? Yes. Obviously, this isn't going to be as good as if your work specifically was highlighted and you were specifically highlighted with it, especially if there's a nice picture of you on the website with you receiving some kind of award as a result. Like, that's great. But if your work was written about, as long as you can get a letter from someone that you worked with talking about your contribution to the project, and the high traffic website, you can show the statistics and things, and you're going to include that in your EB1 application. Can I file EB1 as a student? Yes, absolutely. The risk there, there's specific guidance about this USCIS is given saying that there should be no risk, because you need to, the important thing to remember is this is an I-140 application and not a green card application. So an I-140 is simply giving you the opportunity to file for lawful permanent resident status. It doesn't mean you've actually filed for lawful permanent resident status. And so you can still have the intent as an F1 student to not remain in the United States on a permanent basis and have an approved I-140. Now, the one risk, the one thing I have had happen to clients in F1 status with an approved I-140 is I have had people receive more questioning from CBP when they're completing foreign travel. So that there is a risk there. You might have more questions, increased scrutiny. And if you answered those questions the wrong way, then you might risk your F1 status. For example, like if CBP was asking you the question, well, you filed an I-140, does that mean you want to remain in the United States on a permanent basis? What you should say is, no, I'm from India or China or some other country, and right now green cards are backlogged. It's really difficult to get a green card in the United States. It's a long wait for me to get a green card, and so I'm planning ahead. If I ever did want to be a permanent resident in the United States, then I want to have that option down the road, and that's why I pursued an I-140 now, knowing that I might want to do that in the future. Right now, I'm just a student pursuing my study in the United States, and that is my focus. I don't have an intent to remain here on a permanent basis, something like that. You wouldn't want to say, oh yeah, absolutely, I want a green card now. And that's being truthful. You're not lying to anybody. That's what you're doing. Who knows what's going to happen to anybody 10 years, 5 years down the road, right? All right, a couple other questions, and then I want to get to profile review. Should I file NIW before EB1? I would consult an attorney on this, possibly. If you don't have a super strong EB1 profile, then absolutely if you have a master's degree or a PhD, in my opinion right now. NIW, there's been some recent guidance from the Biden administration making it a lot easier to get an EB2 NIW. Setting your priority date might be advantageous down the road. The EB1 is becoming a more common option for folks, especially folks from India, because backlogs in the other categories are so difficult to overcome. That backlog in EB1 might increase. And I have no idea what's going to happen with the visa bulletin. No one does. But if it backlogged more, you're going to want to have that priority date set now as soon as you can so that you can adjust status earlier in the future if possible. Can I take a risk of EB1 without having my priority date set? Yeah. If you have a strong category, I say go. If you have a strong profile, I say go for it. You might want to vet that with an attorney, or if you just know that you have a good profile, then go for it. I will be honest, there's really a lot of people are like, well, if I get a denial, does that impact me in the future? No, like you tried to tell the US government you're an extraordinary individual and all they did was say no. That's not going to impact future statuses. It shouldn't impact future statuses. So the risk is sometimes worth it. And it's a little bit like gambling, and I don't gamble myself. So it's kind of sad that we have to gamble with our immigration matters, but it might be worth it to you. Can I use GitHub projects as evidence? Yes, especially if you can show it's being used by other people. Do patents help? Absolutely. The government has said something you have done is extraordinary and given you a patent. That's literally evidence from the government saying you're extraordinary. Now, word of caution with patents, a patent that is used is 10 times better than a patent that is just approved, right? So if you have a patent and you have evidence that it's being utilized by other professionals in your industry, that it's being cited by other professionals in the industry, that is incredible evidence. So, yeah, super helpful, super helpful. Patents are great. Writing a book, that can be helpful as well. Now, word of caution, self-publishing is not as helpful unless you can show that a lot of people are using it. This comes back to you need to be able to show that other people are using it. Those usage statistics are really important because if you write a book, anybody can write a book. If I write a book, I self-publish, I'm the only person to ever read that book. It's not that important, right? But if you write a book related to your area of expertise and 1,000 people buy it for $150 a pop, great evidence, right? And if you can show it's on a course list or something like that, very helpful. Advantage to having H-1B is just that H-1B allows you to have non-immigrant and immigrant intent. When should you ask your employer to start your EB-1B petition? Now. I would talk to them as soon as possible. And can you hire a lawyer outside your company for an EB-1? Absolutely you can, but you might want to talk to your company because they might be willing to pay for it. And there are some companies that'll pay for whatever attorney you want to use. So you might ask, like, I'm more comfortable with this other attorney filing my EB-1. Would you pay for it? And they might say yes. All right. So in preparation for this, I reviewed 3 profiles that were sent my way. I want to go through these kind of quick. So here's the comparison. Profile 1 I reviewed, they judged around 35 peer reviews for various journals. They judged early career awards. They're an editor for Frontiers Journal and a guest editor for Censors Journal. They definitely meet that criteria, right? Judge of the work of others, they have met it. They have a strong profile for judge the work of others. I would have no issues filing for that person as they currently stand for that bullet. Original contributions, PhD, extensive R&D experience. Their products they've worked on have been commercialized. They have a patent. They've done they've done conference presentations. Strong argument there as well. They had 20 articles on Google Scholar with around 117 citations. They're the first author on several. They had 2 book chapters written. I would want some more information on those citations, those book chapters. But that's pretty strong. I typically like citations to be higher if we're using it as an argument, but I've definitely seen many successful EB1 applications for people with 117 citations. Leading in critical role, he's led many teams and helped with many projects. These high salary ones I just added. No one told me their salary in the 3 profiles I picked. I just said this person's probably in the 90th percentile based on a review of their qualifications. This is a good EB1 profile. This is a good EB1 profile. I would say this person has probably around a 75-ish% chance of having a successful application, maybe a little higher. Do know it's really rare for me to give someone more than a 75% chance, just because I think there's always a 10% chance of key denial, no matter who you are, just because it's such a hard visa to get. So that's kind of where we're at with that one. Profile 2, published material about them. Articles were published about projects they had worked on. So it wasn't directly about them, but about projects. They had a master's in business intelligence and analytics, and there were some other arguments that we could make about their original contributions. They had led a team and headed many, many critical projects at a company that had probably made a lot of money, is what it looked like. And it looked like they'd helped secure many major contracts. They had a high salary. And I made that up again. I didn't know the person's salary. I'm just kind of guessing. It looked like they probably had a high salary based on the company they are working for. This person has an interesting profile. They're without authorship and citations. I know a lot of people would be worried here. Depending on the original contributions argument and the type of projects they'd worked on, that's going to really influence their percentage of chance of success for this profile. I was thinking it's probably a coin flip type of case. You're probably looking at around a 50% chance of success. Kind of a tricky argue. It kind of depends on the projects, though. If the projects are well recognized and they're well recognized in their field, a lot of people have used their accomplishments, then maybe that bumps up to around 60%. But there's a chance with that profile, and that's not a bad thing. I don't want people to get discouraged if they think they're around a 50% chance of success. There's a chance there. I might work on some things to improve this profile if it was me. And there are some opportunities there. So maybe this is someone who tries to get some opportunities judging other people to improve their profile. And maybe that bumps them up another 10% to that maybe 60, 70% chance of success, and maybe they're filing. All right, profile 3, they'd done 34 peer reviews. They'd done some research contributions at their company. They had 35 articles with over 1,400 citations, and they had several research roles for prestigious universities. My thought on this person was you have like at least a 90% chance of success with an EB1B filing, and you're probably seeing in that 85% chance range with an EB1A. So this is the type of person I'm like, reach out to me and let's work on an EB1. Let's get it filed. Very good profile. Let's get it filed ASAP. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. I'm not going to leave this up, so if you want to take a screenshot real quick, because I want to get to Q&A. There's my website, email. Follow me on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Follow me on YouTube. You can follow my channel. You can call me if you want. There's lots of ways to get in touch. And I'm going to quit presenting so we can jump back on things.
Amazing. Thanks